Daniel Lawson struggled to open his eyes as the sharp scent of antiseptic filled his nostrils. His body felt heavy, his limbs unmovable, as if they had been tied down by invisible ropes. The beeping of machines echoed softly in the hospital room, a steady rhythm that reminded him he was still alive. But something was wrong. His mind felt foggy, like he had been asleep for a long time. Slowly, his vision adjusted to the light in the room. He could barely move his fingers, his throat dry and sore. He didn't know how long he had been here, but he felt weak, too weak. Then he heard voices. The door creaked open, and light footsteps entered. A familiar, smooth voice spoke, one that used to bring him comfort. But this time it sent a cold chill through his spine. Vanessa, his wife. She wasn't alone. Lucas, his stepbrother. Their voices were hushed, but Daniel could hear them clearly. "This is taking too long," Vanessa muttered, frustration in her voice. "The doctor said he might not wake up, so why is he still alive?" Daniel's heart pounded. What was she saying? Lucas chuckled. "Relax, sweetheart. He's practically a vegetable now. Even if he wakes up, he won't remember anything. And by then we will have taken everything." Daniel's stomach twisted. He had been in a plane crash. He remembered flying back home from a business meeting, his private jet soaring smoothly through the sky. Then the explosion. A fireball engulfed the cockpit. The deafening noise of metal tearing apart. And then darkness. Now, lying helpless in this hospital bed, he was piecing together the truth. His wife and stepbrother had planned it. They wanted him dead. Vanessa sighed, sounding irritated. "The doctors say his body is healing. What if he regains consciousness?" Lucas scoffed. "Then we make sure he never speaks." "But come on, Vanessa, this is perfect. The world thinks he's in a coma. That means we have all the power now." Daniel swallowed hard, forcing himself to remain still, pretending to be asleep. His heart was racing, but he couldn't let them know. Not yet. Vanessa's heels clicked on the floor as she walked closer to his bed. "I already fired most of his useless, loyal employees. The hotel empire is mine now. Soon, I'll make sure the company completely belongs to us." The word made Daniel's blood boil. The woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted, had betrayed him. And his own stepbrother, the man he had helped rise in the business world, had stabbed him in the back. They had tried to kill him. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure they could hear it. He forced himself to remain still, to keep his breathing slow and steady, even though everything inside him screamed. "We need to move quickly," Vanessa continued. "The board of directors is already worried. They're waiting for an update. If we play this right, by next week, the company will be in my hands." Daniel bit his tongue so hard he tasted blood. They weren't just trying to kill him, they wanted his company. His empire. Lawson Luxury Hotels. Everything he had worked for. Lucas chuckled. "And after that?" Vanessa's voice softened, turning sultry. "Then, my love, we get everything we deserve. The money. Power. The life we always wanted, together." Kiss. The sound of lips meeting. Disgust twisted in Daniel's stomach. His wife. His own flesh and blood. A monstrous betrayal. The sound of heels clicked on the floor. Vanessa sighed. "Let's go. There's a meeting with the lawyers. We need to make sure his will benefits us." Lucas chuckled. "We should start celebrating soon. Daniel Lawson is as good as dead." The door creaked again, then clicked shut. Silence. Daniel let out a slow, controlled breath. His whole body shook with fury, but he forced himself to stay calm. He wasn't dead. He wasn't brain dead. He was alive. And when the time was right, they would pay. Daniel remained still long after Vanessa and Lucas had left the room. His breathing was slow, controlled, but inside, his heart pounded with a fury he had never known. Every word they had spoken echoed in his mind. They had tried to kill him. They had wanted him out of the way, not just for his money, but for power, for control, for their twisted love affair. He wanted to get up, to storm out of the hospital, to drag them both into the light and make them answer for what they had done. But he couldn't. Not yet. If they even suspected he was conscious, they would finish what they started. He had to be patient. He had to play the game better than they did. For the next few days, he lay in bed, silent, unmoving. Nurses came and went, checking his vitals, adjusting his whispering to each other about how tragic his condition was. Vanessa showed up twice a day, but it was never out of concern. She sat by his bed, scrolling through her phone, making calls, speaking in hushed voices about lawyers and stock transfers. Lucas never came into the room. He didn't need to. He had Vanessa doing all the work. Then things started changing. It began with Daniel's most trusted employees disappearing from the company. He overheard one of the nurses speaking to another about how Lawson Luxury Hotels had suddenly let go of key executives. The CFO, the head of operations, even Daniel's longtime personal assistant. All gone. Fired. Vanessa was wiping out everyone loyal to him. The next day, he overheard a conversation between her and someone on the phone. She was laughing, her voice dripping with amusement. "I told you, darling, once the board sees the paperwork, they won't have a choice. They'll have to make me interim CEO. And when they do, well, who's going to fight me? My dear husband is in a coma after all." Daniel clenched his fists beneath the sheets. She was moving faster than he expected. He needed to gather more information. That night, when the hospital quieted down, he risked opening his eyes. Just a sliver. Just enough to take in his surroundings. The room was dimly lit, with only a soft glow from the machines keeping him company. He tested his fingers, his legs. Weak but not useless. His body was healing. Slowly. A few more days passed. He listened. He learned. The more he heard, the more he realized how ruthless Vanessa had become. She was holding private meetings with the board, convincing them that Daniel would never recover. Lucas was working behind the scenes, ensuring that Daniel's shares would be transferred to Vanessa under the guise of business continuity. They were tightening their grip, and soon, there would be nothing left for him to return to. Then, something unexpected happened. A nurse came in one afternoon, younger than the others, nervous. She moved quickly, checking his her fingers trembling slightly. When she leaned down, she whispered, so quietly that no one else could hear. "You're not alone." Daniel's pulse jumped. His eyes remained closed, but his mind raced. The nurse straightened up and left the room without another word. Not alone. Someone knew. That night Vanessa visited again. This time she was agitated, pacing, muttering under her breath. "This isn't happening fast enough," she hissed into her phone. "The lawyer says we need more proof that he's never waking up. What am I supposed to do? Kill him in the hospital?" Daniel listened carefully. Lucas's voice was distant on the other end of the line. "Relax. We'll handle it. We just need to make sure no one starts asking questions. Everything has to look natural." Vanessa sighed. "I hate waiting. The sooner he's out of the picture, the better." She hung up and stormed out. Daniel exhaled slowly. They were getting impatient. That was good. Desperation made people reckless. He just had to make sure he stayed ahead of them. And he needed to find out who else knew the truth. Daniel remained as still as ever, but inside, his mind was racing. The words from the nurse echoed in his head. "You're not alone." Someone knew. Someone was watching. But was this person a friend or another enemy? He had no way of knowing yet. He needed answers, but he couldn't afford to move too soon. Vanessa and Lucas were already suspicious. If they found out he was conscious before he had a plan, they would make sure he never left that hospital alive. The next day, the same young nurse returned. This time, she hesitated at the door, glancing over her shoulder before stepping inside. Her hands were steady as she checked his vitals, but her voice was barely above a whisper. "I know you can hear me," she murmured. "Don't move. Just listen." Daniel remained motionless, his breathing deep and steady. "I don't have much time. Someone's been looking for you." Woman. She's the one who got you here. His mind sharpened. A woman. Ooh. The nurse continued, her voice urgent. Her name is Sophia. She's been calling, but your wife made sure the hospital won't let her visit. She's been digging into the crash. She doesn't believe it was an accident. Sophia. The name meant nothing to him. But if she had found him and saved him, then she might be the only person who could help him now. The nurse pulled back, resuming her usual routine as if nothing had happened. She pressed a small note into his palm before stepping away. Read it when you're alone, she whispered, then turned and left the room. Daniel waited. Hours passed. The night shift came in, checked his monitors and left. When he was sure no one would come, he carefully uncurled his fingers and peeked at the note. One sentence. She's watching. Don't give up. He exhaled slowly. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Someone was on his side. The next day, Vanessa came in with a lawyer. We need proof of his condition, she was saying, her voice all fake concern. The board is hesitant. I need something more official. The lawyer nodded. I understand. If the doctors confirm he's permanently unresponsive, we can move forward. Daniel kept his breathing steady, his heart pounding. They were getting closer. If they managed to get full legal control, they wouldn't need to keep him alive anymore. He needed to act soon. That night, another note appeared. This time, slipped into the folds of his hospital blanket. Sophia is coming. Be ready. His pulse jumped. Who was this woman? Why did she care so much? Then something clicked. Parachute. Vanessa had mentioned it when she thought he was unconscious. She had dismissed it, believing he hadn't had time to use it. But what if he had? What if Sophia had found him after he landed? His fingers twitched. Pieces of memory stirred in his mind. Flames. Falling. The rush of air. The impact. Rain. And then. Blurry face. A woman's voice. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to force the memory to the surface. A stormy night. Small cabin. Hands pressing against his chest, keeping him alive. A voice saying, stay with me. Sophia. She had saved him. And now she was coming back. Daniel knew one thing for sure. He had to be ready. Because the moment Sophia walked through those doors, everything would change. Daniel knew he couldn't wait any longer. Every day that passed, Vanessa and Lucas tightened their grip on his empire. If he remained in this hospital, he would become exactly what they wanted him to be. Gone. Sophia was coming. He didn't know how, but he had to be ready. That night he faked a small seizure. It wasn't difficult. His body was weak. His muscles barely obeyed him, and the act of straining himself sent real tremors through his arms and chest. The monitors beeped wildly, alarms blaring. Nurses rushed in, calling for a doctor. Vanessa wasn't there, but they would tell her. They would all think he was getting worse. Perfect. The hospital dimmed after hours. Footsteps became quieter. The night staff was always smaller, less alert. Then, just before midnight, the door to his room creaked open. Figure slipped inside. Not a nurse. Sophia. She was wearing a hoodie, her face half hidden in the shadows, but Daniel recognized her instantly. Not from memory but from something deeper, a feeling. The moment she stepped closer, his body reacted before his mind did. Flash of pain. Fire. Cold hands pressing against his skin, a whispered voice telling him to hold on. She had been there in the wreckage. She had pulled him from the edge of death. Sophia placed a finger to her lips, eyes scanning him quickly, assessing his state. Then, in a barely there whisper, she said, "If you want to live, you need to trust me." Daniel's throat was dry. He couldn't speak yet, not properly, but he gave her the smallest nod. That was enough. She moved quickly, pulling a small bag from under her hoodie. "I don't have much time," she whispered. "They have guards watching this wing, but I paid off one of them. He'll give us a 5-minute window." Daniel tried to shift, but pain shot through his body. He was too weak. He wasn't ready. Sophia saw it in his face. I know you're not at full strength, but if you stay here you're dead. Vanessa already made arrangements. They're pulling the plug in 3 days. His fingers curled into a fist. 3 days. That was all Vanessa had given him. Sophia reached into her bag and pulled out a syringe. This will help. It's a mild stimulant. It won't heal you, but it'll keep you awake long enough to get out of here. Daniel hesitated for half a second before giving another slow nod. Sophia injected the drug into his arm, and within seconds, warmth spread through his veins. His muscles still ached, but the haze in his mind cleared. He could move barely but enough. She helped him sit up. His legs trembled when they touched the cold floor, but Sophia was already pulling a hospital gown over him, covering him with a hoodie. We have to go now. They slipped out of the room. The hallway was empty, just as she had promised. They moved in silence, each step slow, careful. Daniel's heart pounded, but he focused on moving forward, step by step. Then, just as they reached the back exit, a voice. Hey! You there, stop! Guard! Sophia grabbed Daniel's arm and hissed. Run! He didn't think. He moved. Pain shot up his spine, his legs wobbled, but adrenaline pushed him forward. Sophia yanked open a service door, dragging him through. Footsteps thundered behind them. Inside. Cold air. A waiting car. Sophia shoved him inside, jumped in beside him and slammed the door. Go! She shouted at the driver. The car screeched forward, the hospital disappearing behind them. Daniel collapsed against the seat, breathless. Sophia watched him carefully before saying, It's time to take back what's yours. He closed his eyes for just a second, then opened them, filled with fire. Tell me everything. Daniel sat in the back of the speeding car, his breath heavy. His body still weak but his mind sharper than ever. He had escaped. He was alive. And now, it was time to reclaim everything that had been stolen from him. Sophia sat beside him, her gaze steady. They think you're dead, she said. Let's use that. Daniel turned to her, his jaw clenched. I want to know everything you found. Sophia nodded. After I found you in the wreckage, I started digging. Vanessa and Lucas didn't just want you gone. They wanted to erase you completely. They've been moving your assets, shifting company shares, even liquidating some of your personal properties. Daniel's fists tightened. And the board. Sophia's expression darkened. They're being manipulated. Vanessa's playing the grieving wife in public, but behind closed doors, she's making ruthless decisions. She's planning to merge Lawson Luxury Hotels with another company, one controlled by Lucas. Daniel exhaled sharply. So that's their endgame. Sophia nodded. Once that happens, there's no going back. Lucas will be in control, and Vanessa will be untouchable. Daniel leaned back, his mind racing. He had to act fast. He couldn't just expose them, he had to destroy them. Sophia pulled out a small USB drive. I found something else. Lucas has been siphoning money from the company into offshore accounts. I have records, transactions, even calls between him and Vanessa discussing the accident. Daniel took the drive, gripping it tightly. This is enough to bury them. Sophia gave a small smile. That's the plan. The car pulled up to a discreet location, a penthouse in the heart of the city. An old ally of Daniel's, someone still loyal, had offered him sanctuary. As soon as they arrived, Daniel reached out to his most trusted contacts. He called an emergency board meeting, disguising it as a routine company update. Vanessa wouldn't suspect anything, until it was too late. The next evening, at the grand ballroom of the Lawson Hotel, the event was in full swing. Investors, board members, and the media were gathered for what was supposed to be a celebration of Vanessa's leadership. She stood at the podium, wearing an elegant black dress, the picture of a powerful yet grieving widow. Lucas sat in the front row, smirking. Then, just as Vanessa raised her glass for a toast, the ballroom doors swung open. Gasps filled the room. Daniel walked in. Alive, strong, unstoppable. Vanessa's face drained of color. Her glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor. Lucas shot to his feet, his expression twisting from shock to terror. Daniel strode forward, every step filled with quiet fury. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, his voice calm but deadly. Silence. The entire room was frozen. Vanessa swallowed hard. Daniel." He smiled coldly. "Surprised to see me." Lucas stumbled back. This isn't possible. You were." Daniel cut him off. "Dead. That's what you wanted, wasn't it?" He turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to clear up any misunderstandings. My plane crash. It wasn't an accident. It was planned by my wife and my dear stepbrother." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Daniel reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. With a click, audio recordings began playing over the speakers. Vanessa's voice, Lucas's voice, their plans, their confessions, their betrayal. The evidence was damning. Vanessa staggered back, shaking her head. This is fake. He's lying." Daniel turned to her, his eyes dark. "Lying? Then how do you explain this?" He tossed the USB drive onto the podium. "Financial fraud. Money laundering. Attempted murder. Your entire empire, built on betrayal." The board members exchanged horrified glances. Investors whispered among themselves. The media snapped photos, cameras flashing. Security guards stepped forward. Vanessa's panic turned into rage. "You think you've won," she spat. "I built this company. I made it stronger while you were gone. Without me, it'll collapse." Daniel stepped closer, his voice low. "You didn't build anything. You stole it." Lucas, seeing no way out, tried to run. Security tackled him before he could reach the exit. Vanessa screamed as the guards closed in on her. "You can't do this to me, Daniel. I was your wife." Daniel stared at her, his expression unreadable. "And I was your husband. But that didn't stop you from trying to kill me." The last thing Vanessa saw before she was dragged away was the cold, victorious look in Daniel's eyes. The reckoning was complete. As the crowd erupted in chaos, Sophia stepped beside Daniel, her lips curling into a small, satisfied smile. "So, what's next?" Daniel exhaled, feeling the weight of betrayal finally lift. He had his empire back. His name was cleared. And justice had been served. He turned to Sophia, his eyes steady. "I rebuild. But this time I do it right." And with that, Daniel Lawson walked forward, leaving the past behind. If you love this story, please leave a comment and share to your loved ones.